The Delphi double murder case is a mystery that has us captivated, and it has for years. There is a new development in the case. Is this the missing piece that will put the entire picture together, or are we to not know what is for years to come? What is so strange about this case is the victims left us clues to help catch the killer. We know the day, February 13th, 2017. We know where. Half a mile from the Monon High Bridge, which as of 1 year ago is under a $260,000 renovation because of how terrible of condition the bridge was in. We even have a video of the suspect. So how on earth is this case not solved? Liberty German got a video of the person believed to be the killer. She also let the recording keep going in her pocket. So now we have the killer on tape. The two friends were found half a mile away, lying next to each other, deceased on Valentine's Day. But for some reason, this case is not solved. There are still a lot of pieces missing. What pieces are those? Well, it's the middle pieces. You know how it starts, you know how it ends. We faintly know something leading up to it. Here's what we know about the Delphi murders today. You're listening to The Lab. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz. And after years of silence, there are new developments in the case. But before we can talk about the new developments, we have to talk about the case itself and take it all the way back to the beginning in Delphi, Indiana. February 13th, 2017, Delphi, Indiana, school is canceled, and we have an administrative leave day. 14-year-old Libby German and best friend 13-year-old Abby Williams wanted to go for a walk in the park, but not being old enough to drive, they needed a ride, and they convinced Libby's older sister, Kelsey, to drop them off at around 1:30 on her way to work, and she dropped them off at a side entrance at the trailhead. Libby's father agreed to pick the two up around 3:30 that day, so the plan was he was to call Libby near the time of the pickup so they could just simply meet him at the same spot the sister dropped them off at. In Delphi, Indiana, there are 10 miles of interconnected trails for people to explore. And as we all know now, the most famous of all the attraction was the Monon High Bridge, 65 feet above Deer Creek. It's an old abandoned railroad bridge that has fallen into really bad condition. But as of February 2020, as I mentioned earlier, there's a $250,000 renovation because of how bad a shape the bridge is in. Strange that people even walk across it, but they do by the hundreds. And this bridge meets the main trail on the north side. Deer Creek is found at the bottom of a very steep hill with kind of shell rocks and overgrown forestry. It wasn't the first time that Libby had been across the bridge. She enjoyed that kind of thing. Abby had never been across the bridge before, but Libby was sure to change it that day. Was there a killer already waiting for them? Was this a set-up meeting? At 2:05, Libby posted a Snapchat of the bridge going south. And at 2:09, she posted a photo of Abby on the bridge. Remember, 3:30 is when the father was supposed to pick them up. They hadn't made it halfway to the south end of the bridge yet. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes to get across the bridge walking. A few moments later, they crossed the bridge on the south end when they noticed a man approaching them in a fairly quick manner. Libby was scared enough to get a few seconds of video while holding the phone so low by her side that the person approaching them wouldn't notice. The man is seen walking with his hands in his pockets. He's looking down, but you can't make out his face. But he is wearing blue jeans, a gray hoodie, a blue zip-up jacket, and it looks as though he is wearing a hat. And it's believed by the sheriff that he's 180 to 200 pounds, 5'7" to 5'10", reddish brown hair. And they don't know what color his eyes are, but they are sure that they're not blue. And that still confuses me. But as he gets closer, she puts the phone in her pocket and it's still recording. And this is what you hear. It's absolutely terrifying. The man sounds so calm, People believe possibly that he had a gun, and that way he was able to forcibly make the kids go down the hill. Now, as for the audio that has been released to the public, that's all there is. But it has been said that there's more audio, possibly Abby even saying, "Is that creepy man still following us?" So as they make their way down the hill, they get to the banks of Deer Creek. A Nike shoe was recovered and a pair of underwear at the scene. The details of the murder haven't been officially released, but the leaked text from search crews say that their bodies were cut with a knife and that their bodies were deliberately posed according to those texts. And the attack on Libby was the most brutal. She was found with no clothes on. A former prosecutor on the Down the Hill podcast shared a little bit about the crime scene. Quote, "There was a lot of crime scene evidence and some of it is somewhat odd. But when I say that, any murder scene tends to have odd facts about it. There's a lot of unique facts there, and honestly, I'm shocked. And I promise you, the police are shocked. This crime scene was physically strange, and it is very odd." Unquote. He said that there were also 3 signatures there. A signature is when a killer leaves something, making it that it was him specifically or her who committed the crimes. Has he committed other crimes? Signatures and serial killers go hand in hand, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The prosecutor also said that one of the signatures at the scene was religious in nature. What religion, I'm not sure. There's a lot of speculation about the signatures or what it could mean. And it could mean a multitude of things. So this is all speculation. The facts of this case have been closely guarded. We don't know exactly when the murders took place, but there are witnesses that do say they passed a man on the trail fitting the description at about 3:15 p.m. February 13th. Everything about this case, what they saw and when they saw it, who saw what, when, where, has been hotly contested. And if you take a close look at the suspect's video, it looks as though he has layers on, and that could be masking weapons, possibly a deer kit, police believe, and or a gun, or both. But how does somebody cross a shallow creek, killing 2 girls, and escape with nobody seeing him? There were exits near 2 main roads, which would have made it probably a lot easier to get away. And he could have been parked at the entrance that the girls came into, or he could have been parked at the cemetery. Either way, he could have made a relatively easy escape, which leads me to think that maybe he had this planned out the whole time, that he had picked the place and possibly done this before. All those questions need answers. Libby's dad showed up at 3:15 trying to get a hold of her. He wanted to let her know that he was there to pick them up, but she didn't answer. So he called Grandma Betty. Now, Grandma Betty was the one that was raising Libby at the time because of some problems that Libby's parents have had. But she didn't answer for Grandma Betty either. One of the oddities about this case, and there are many, is that the Find Your Phone app had been erased in a factory reset and hadn't been put back in, or Grandma Betty would have known her location. At around 5:30, after looking for the girls, Mike reports the girls missing to the police officially. And I would assume that they probably didn't think at this point that there was really any kind of murder and that the bridge is treacherous and dangerous for anybody to be on. So you would assume that it could be an accident, but you just don't know. You just don't know where they are. Mike didn't know where they were, and the sun was going down. The temperature was going down, and they expressed that they had concern because the girls were not dressed for this kind of chilly weather. And the police seemed to have called the night pretty early. They didn't seem too concerned, but the family was very concerned, and possibly 100 people or more stayed and kept searching. But the next day, February 14th, 2017, Valentine's Day, a massive search is underway for the girls. And it was about 12:15 that afternoon when the girls were found by a group of searchers. The story goes, a man using his new iPhone, using the zoom feature to see further, he saw movement, and that happened to be a couple of deer. But as he panned over, he saw Abby and Libby. And you would think that if this crime scene was decorated the way that it's been sort of described, he either had the props with him or that he went to get them. But you would think that he would be a local if he was able to navigate this place. People were looking for these girls that night. When the sheriff was asked why the girls weren't found earlier that day with so many volunteers, he said, "I think I will leave that question unanswered." And I still don't know what that means, other than he didn't want to answer it. Remember, they were found half a mile from the bridge. If they would have been found that night, could the killer still have been on the scene? Could he have heard people searching and took off? He obviously wanted them to be found, and he wanted people to see that he had decorated. So think about this. Delphi is a tiny town. When I say tiny, it's about 3,000 people. But it's close to a couple of big cities, which makes everything more difficult. In this world of social media, teenage girls, just like every other person in the world, are very active on social media. So the new theory is that they were possibly catfished, and that's how the killer knew that they would be there when they were there. And if you've ever paid attention to the death dates, Libby's date of death was February 13th, and Abby's was February 14th. And it's not because they believe one lived longer than the other. It's really not controversial at all. By all accounts, the girls were killed on the 13th. But Abby's parents chose to put the day that she was found, which was February 14th. The law allows for that. Not too much controversy there. On February 15th, Bridge Guy, as the world has come to know him, has a photo released by law enforcement. And all they say was that he was somebody that they wanted to talk to because he was there that day. And then on February 19th, law enforcement confirmed Bridge Guy was their main suspect. They also revealed the photo came from Libby that was put out there on February 15th. And it was said that the phone was found near the crime scene, but we don't know what phone. And tips were pouring in, and people believed that this case would be solved quickly. And why wouldn't you? You have a picture of the guy, you have audio of the guy, the girl's body, the crime scene, and there was DNA. Where it came from and what kind of DNA, they never said. But they do say that there is suggestive evidence of fingerprints. So how's this case not solved? The girls were found on a man's property by the name of Ron Logan. Ron Logan had kind of a checkered past with law enforcement, but nothing that suggested that he was this type of killer. He had had alibis. He was out doing chores, and he was caught drinking at a pizza parlor. Fortunately for him, he was on probation for a DUI, and since the girls were found on his property, his probation was violated, and they didn't need anything more to search his house, and so they did, and they came up empty. But that's just a case of the police doing their due diligence, and I respect that. Ron was just sentenced to house arrest and cleared in the case of Libby and Abby's deaths. 4 months after the murders, a composite sketch of Bridgeman was circulated based on what witnesses saw that day, and it was circulated everywhere. One of the major suspects in the case name was Garrett Kurtz, and Garrett was a local meth head who was found guilty for strangling Nicole Bowen to death with the help of his girlfriend and another man. He says they did it because he was scared she was going to turn them in for cooking meth. So they killed her. Well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, it's somewhat perplexing, and it could be absolutely nothing and more than a coincidence. Years ago, Libby's dad was arrested on drug charges. So then he cuts a deal to act as an informant for the police to reduce a sentence. It's pretty common practice. One of the names that was given was Garrett's girlfriend, who lived in Delphi at the time. But growing up, Garrett spent a lot of time at his father's friend's farm. It turns out that that friend that owned that farm was Ron Logan. Remember Ron Logan, the drunk? Libby and Abby were found on his property dead. Garrett denies having anything to do with what happened. April 2019, 2 years since the murders, the police call a press conference. And people were on edge because this was a big deal. And what was said was nothing short of shocking. They told people to forget the sketch that had been circulated of Bridge Guy for the last 2 years, and that had been circulated everywhere. Then they unveiled the new sketch, significantly younger than the first sketch, and this person had no facial hair. And at the press conference, the investigator said directly to whoever the killer was, quote, "We believe you're hiding in plain sight and maybe even in this room. We've likely interviewed you or someone close to you," unquote. They also asked the public to notify them if anybody remembered a vehicle being abandoned at a CPS building between noon and 5 on February 13th, 2017. It was less than a mile from the cemetery. And remember, the cemetery was a straight shot to Deer Creek. But we don't know if anybody has come forward with any information about the car. According to the detectives, the killer is someone who is well known in the community. Now, here's the strange thing about the sketches. The first sketch that was released wasn't even the original sketch. The sketch that was released 2 years later was the very first sketch ever drawn. And it was drawn just 2 days after the murders, but it wasn't used. So now, the 2021 theory is catfishing. This comes about because of an online profile by the name of Anthony Schatz. While investigating the murders, law enforcement, specifically in the Indiana State Police Information Department, released the name of the fictitious profile, Anthony Schatz. This imposter used pictures of a well-known Instagram model. He portrayed himself to be extremely wealthy and owning numerous cars. The creator of this fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images. And he would use fake addresses in an attempt to meet with them. And detectives are seeking information about the person who created the Anthony Schatz profile, so they ask anybody that has been contacted by this fictitious online profile to speak with law enforcement. So Anthony Schatz turns out to actually be a man named Keegan Anthony Klein. Klein's father's home had been searched fairly close to after the girls were murdered. Why? Well, he was suspected of child pornography. So what he would do was he would use male models' photos on Snapchat and Instagram to lure the girls to send him inappropriate and X-rated videos of themselves, and he saved them all and even shared them. Sometimes he'd even use his sister's name to convince the girls who they were talking to was another girl. And in 2017, they seized at least 6 pieces of electronics. And one of the phones that they found was factory reset February 17th, just 4 days after the murders of Abby and Libby. And he was polygraphed and taken home. But then he also turned another phone over a little bit later. Snapchat and Instagram and other apps had been deleted on February 27th. Apparently, he told the cops that he was effed and ready to grab a bag and ditch town, but he never did. But what I don't understand is after all this pornography that they found, he still stayed out of jail for 3 years. Klein was officially arrested in August of 2020. And more than a year later, police are making a connection between him and the Delphi murders. And if you think in the way of the police, it has been excruciatingly painful to get any information out of them. So the fact that they are connecting the Anthony Schatz profile that was owned by Klein and connecting it to Abby and Libby is potentially groundbreaking. Is this the break that is needed to solve this crime? Hopefully this is the piece that gets Abby and Libby justice and brings some closure to the family and the friends of those affected. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz, and this is The Lab.